Well, welcome to No Quarter November Live. I believe this is the fourth installment here. And as we get started, let me remind you that you can watch the brand new How to Save the World documentary. That is available on Canon Plus, and you can access Canon Plus. Is it for the whole month of November? No, well, is it for a whole month, or does it end at the end of November?
A whole month.
A whole month from when you subscribe?
Yeah.
Okay. So whenever you subscribe,
Shot clock starts then.
the shot clock starts then, and you have one free month with the code NQNQ. And that How to Save the World documentary is there. Doug, do you really think you can save the world?
I don't know. I've not seen the documentary yet. They keep things from him. So some people have kicked at the apparent megalomania of the title, How to Save the World. But wait, in 11 easy steps, simple steps, not easy steps. But if the steps include things like believe in Jesus or accept what the Bible says, that's not megalomania. In fact, it's megalomania not to. Right? That's the issue. So if God didn't want us to save the world, then why did he tell us to disciple the nations? What is that? Discipling the nations, baptizing them, teaching them to obey everything Christ has commanded, it sounds like saving the world to me.
Yes. And you've written a book on this topic, Gashmu Saith It.
Yes. And apparently some people found the title opaque.
Do you want to speak to it? Do you want to clarify what's going on there?
Well, that's one of the verses in the Bible that just really tickled me. It's from Nehemiah, and when Nehemiah is involved in the work of rebuilding the city and the great work of reconstruction, which is what we're engaged in, his adversaries in the land come and bring reports to him about what all the no good that they must be up to. And they say, you're doing this nefarious thing and that nefarious thing, and Gashmu saith it. So Gashmu saith it is, who's Gashmu? We all know who Nehemiah is, but Gashmu, we know nothing about him except that he was a critic.
And that book is one of the free Kindles that's available this week, including also The Lord's Service and Case for Classical Christian Education. All of those are free Kindles available this week for No Quarter November. So why don't we get started by talking about your post this week. Trump has come out. He's going to run.
He announced he's running for the Republican nomination, and he announced 2 years early. It'd be hard to announce earlier. But he's right on it. He's going for it, and this has caused a lot of consternation and a lot of quarters, and we have to reckon with the facts on the ground. The great red wave that people were expecting didn't materialize, although the Republicans did take the House in sort of a squeaker. The one place in the country where there was a red wave was in Florida, where DeSantis sort of took the election walking away with it. And so people have set this whole thing up as a Trump-DeSantis matchup. And one of the things I talk about in the blog post is that Trump had a strong, what was good about Trump's administration? Well, the appointment of 3 Supreme Court justices that pushed us over the line to get Roe overturned. That's a supreme accomplishment. That was just a wonderful thing. But I had some criticisms of Trump as well. I thought he got completely rolled on COVID and lockdowns and the vaccine and everything, and sort of cooperated with his adversaries in running him out of town, because that was how they wrecked the economy that was going to be his strong suit for running. And I didn't like how he dunked on Pence for on the ratification of the votes in the Electoral College, because Pence had the official capacity to put a stick in the spokes, and didn't use it, and Trump really landed on him for that. But Trump had official powers at the time that he didn't use. And why would he blame Pence for not acting on something that Pence didn't believe in when Trump wouldn't act on something he did believe in? I think that's a real problem. But regardless of the great positive, Dobbs, and the negatives, which are there, people are assuming that Trump and DeSantis are going to be the heavyweight championship of the world. They're going to go against each other. Well, it's 2 years out. And there are plenty of other Republican, conservative, ambitious types who aren't getting any younger. And if they pile in, Trump's base is a diehard base. If there's anything about Trump's base that we know, we know that they're diehards, and they stick with him. He's not going to lose his base. So anybody who comes in, a Cruz or a Rubio or the Nikki Haley, or if other conservative types come in, they're just going to take votes away from DeSantis.
Do you think that Trump's base is transferable? So if you had, say, Cruz and DeSantis, and then DeSantis won, there's kind of an expectation that Cruz's followers would then switch. But do you think that Trump's followers, if say it's Trump versus DeSantis and DeSantis gets it, do Trump's followers say, "I'm going home, I'm not voting," or do you think they're able to transfer?
I think more of them would go home than transfer. I think it's that kind of diehard thing. I think that if Trump bowed out of the race and endorsed DeSantis, or something like that, I think his followers are transferable.
But you're not sure if he's capable of that.
I don't think he's. I don't think so. And in the post, I go into the personality. Whatever else Trump is, he's tenacious in this kind of scrap, in this kind of fight. And so I don't think you're going to get him to gracefully bow out for the good of the party. It's just not going to happen.
Can I ask kind of a theological question? When I remember when the first time when Trump was running, the thing that was so hard about voting for him was moral character.
Yeah.
But the thing is, a presidential candidate is not the same thing as running for elder.
Right.
So Titus 1, while describing, or 1 Timothy 3 describing characters that are ideal in a leader, you can't just apply those across the board and say, and a president has to be this as well. To what extent do you think a presidential candidate has to have the moral character that?
First, you don't want to pitch it so high that you couldn't vote for King David were he running, right? So that's a problem. But it does make sense. Character does count, and character matters. And the main way it matters is you want the people who are running for president to keep their word. Right. In Exodus, you want rulers who hate covetousness and who, character does matter, and because character matters, even at a different level, you pitch at a different level for political leaders. But the fact that character matters is why I didn't vote for Trump the first time. Right. 2016, I wrote in another candidate. I opposed him in the primaries and then didn't vote for him in the general because character matters. But he then kept all his promises on justices. And it was the first time in my adult life that I'd seen a candidate. Most of the time, the Republican drill is to run to the right and then govern to the center. Mm-hmm. And Trump is the first person I've ever seen who did the opposite. He either stayed right where he was in the campaign, or to the extent that he ran to the center, he then moved right. And he kept his promise. The evangelicals, particularly the Southern Baptist evangelical quadrant, that made a deal with Trump. Look, we'll support you, but give us judges. Mm-hmm. That was the deal. And then Trump kept his end of the bargain. He appointed boatloads of judges all through the whole federal judiciary and 3 to the Supreme Court. And so I wound up voting for him in 2020 because character matters. Here you have a politician who kept his word. And so I'm waiting to see how it plays out. I think it'd be premature to say anything, but it wouldn't distress my soul if Trump wound up president again, I think we'd have a rerun of what we had before. And at the same time, if he doesn't get the nomination, I could see myself being grateful for whoever does get the office, depending on who it is.
So Ben, at NSA, we're training students to shape culture. We're looking at a 2-year presidential campaign from Donald J. Trump. That's going to change. That's going to set a certain tone in our culture, in our nation.
A high tone.
What are the implications, for shaping culture over the next 2 years while you got this continual Trump train going?
Yeah, I think that learning to be clear thinking in moments like that just becomes that much more important. I think that Lewis in the third of the space trilogy.
That Hideous Strength.
That Hideous Strength. There's that conversation where he talks about the way the world is always coming to a point, that God is always sharpening. And I think that it's always happening, but we're in one of those moments right now where what was acceptable yesterday, today, it's like God makes it a little bit narrower, and you have to think again constantly, which means you have to have your mind much more clearly on biblical principles and God's word and wisdom than you can on certain party spirits or certain I always go in this direction. I think that's why Jesus tells us that you have to be ready to hate your family, because at one moment this is the place of life, but then another moment, those closest to you, if they've walked away from Christ, you have to be ready to walk away from them. And so there's a clear thinking that I think you have to constantly be exhorting people towards, and then showing them where the biblical principles are, and then also giving them the courage to make those kinds of very, very difficult decisions.
Mm-hmm. And then, I was in Florida during COVID, and I was very proud of DeSantis. I thought he did a really good job. Florida's open. I'm not saying he did everything right there, but everyone knows, hey, Florida seemed to be the place to be during COVID. So if DeSantis does run, not asking for kind of your vote or your, who you want, but what do you think will happen? Like, if DeSantis throws his hat into the ring at some point, what's going to happen between the DeSantis party and the Trump party in the Republican world?
Well, it would almost certainly get ugly, right? And because, back in the primary in 2016, Trump would say things like implicating Ted Cruz's father in the JFK assassination, for example. And what? That was the sort of, I think you can expect that kind of thing. I don't think DeSantis would return fire the same way. I think DeSantis would try to take the high road. But whether or not that's a character issue or just being a shrewd politico, I'm not prepared to say. Right now, I've been impressed with a number of things that DeSantis has said and done. However, I think a lot of mainstream Republicans are going after the low-hanging fruit of angry school board meetings, CRT in the classroom, pornography in the elementary schools. That's an easy thing for a Republican squish to take a stand on, especially if there's momentum behind it. And a real threat to us is in the globalization, the people who want to sort of run the world. And Trump is their enemy. And I'm not sure that any of the other Republicans would be as hostile to that as Trump would be.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's shift gears here. We had just this past week the Respect for Marriage Act, the Disrespect for Marriage Act, that the Senate has overcome a major hurdle, and now it looks like it's on the fast track to becoming an actual law. It links basically gay marriage to interracial marriage and says that these kinds of marriages deserve respect. We had several Republican senators join on with the Respect for Marriage Act. So here we sit. What's the significance of this particular act turning into law in our land?
Yeah, how can you have a Respect for Marriage Act when you can't define what marriage is? What is it? And the fact, basically, there's 12 Republican senators who went for it, and what it means is anything recognized as a marriage in one state has to be accepted in the other 49. And so, which is the first state that's going to legalize polygamy? And that's going to be imposed. It's just like Obergefell. It's going to be imposed on a bunch of the country that's not on board with it, doesn't want that, or doesn't want anything like that. So let's say Utah legalizes polygamy and starts allowing 3, 4, 5 partners in a marriage. You know, that's going to be imposed. That's going to be jammed down the throats of everyone. And the thing that is striking about this is that David French, who has been a courageous fighter for Christians' religious liberty in different cases, has capitulated on Obergefell. He's capitulated on this, and he's calling it a triumph of this is how pluralism is supposed to work, where you don't have LGBTQ prejudice in the workplace, and at the same time we're going to defend the religion. French just filed an amicus brief in a case brought against a web designer who didn't want to do a web page for some sexually suspect thing, right? So French is on his side, but he's only on his side because he's a small businessman running his own thing. French is not prepared to fight for the religious liberty of a Christian working for a big corporation in the middle of June when they're doing the flag pride frenzy thing. Can that Christian say, I don't agree with any of this, and not lose his job, not lose his head? And I don't think French would be prepared to defend that guy, because you're trying to mix two things that don't mix.
Yeah, I was watching some of the Joe Rogan and Matt Walsh interview that recently happened, and Matt Walsh went on Joe Rogan's podcast to talk about his documentary. I think it's What Is a Woman, and they were tracking the whole time. They were talking about the transgender issue, but when gay marriage came up and procreation and wedlock came up, there was a collision of worldviews. So you saw Rogan kept saying, "I don't see why gay marriage causes any trouble for your heterosexual marriage. Like, it's a matter of freedom. It's a personal choice." And the modern mind came out so clearly in Rogan's analysis. Like, everything Rogan was saying was just like, that's exactly what people believe.
Right.
And that's the destruction of our civilization. And it is a matter of definitions. He's like, what's a definition? And he's basically coming up with this idea of a contract. It's just two parties, two people want to make it formal. What's wrong with that?
Home is where you hang your hat. And Walsh, although he could have said this, given his worldview, didn't say, we have to do it this way because God says.
Right.
Right. He didn't say that we were designed to go together this way. Male and female bear the image of God, and that is how human societies are designed to grow and flourish. He didn't say, well, because it's God's will. Because as soon as you say that, you're into territory of, well, which God?
Right.
Which Bible? Which sacred text?
Yeah. And it's a supernatural worldview. It's like God doesn't do it. God doesn't bind it. He doesn't join it. It's not a marriage. You can't say gay marriage is a marriage that God won't bless. That's the way I think a lot of probably evangelicals think. And Rogan would grant them that. Okay, well, you can think this way. It's a marriage that God won't bless. And we're saying, no, it's not a marriage at all.
Yeah.
Because God is the one who, what God has joined together, let man not separate. It's a simple question. Does God join those two together in the institution of marriage, in the reality that marriage is? And the answer is categorically no. That's why we don't recognize it, because that's not the real world. It's not the world we're living in.
I've been getting a few of the emails about this decision or about this legislation, and aimed primarily at college presidents. Like, what's this going to mean for us? And the initial word is the defense of marriage isn't really going to affect the Christian colleges. that it won't have enforcement against the colleges. But I think that there's a lot of kind of like, I don't know, there's a short-sighted celebration of like, well, this isn't going to affect us, so we're still safe. But it's just a death by 1,000 paper cuts, you know. And I think we keep as long as I'm okay, we don't fight it, we don't step out and oppose it. But they're slowly moving that line. And
it's like Hezekiah, peace and safety in my day. That's good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what it is.
What do they do with, you know, if you have dorms, if you're a Christian college, you have dorms, and these people are married?
I'm not sure. There is a qualification in it that, at least the email I was reading, thought it exempted the college campuses. There was, and I'm trying to remember exactly the terminology for it. I can't remember, but they didn't think that it was going to apply to the college campus.
Yeah. I was talking to Jeff Schaefer around here running the Hale Institute, and he mentioned, this is not good. Obviously, if you have a Supreme Court decision, a Obergefell, that's one thing. But to actually enshrine this in federal law, the implications are huge. I mean, you're taking this whole redefinition. It's going to have all sorts of downstream consequences. And they have this little section, at least in the version of the act that I looked at just mid last week. They have this little section where it's, you know, don't worry, this won't touch on religious liberty. This won't touch on liberty of conscience. Like, you have to be out to lunch if you think that little clause has any actual significance for you as Christians.
Even if it did, and this is what happened with the whole Fairness for All Act, where which never happened, but was constantly it was trying to be promoted by the Christian colleges. And the idea was that the colleges themselves, the Christian evangelical colleges, would go out and advocate for the homosexual agenda in exchange for having an exemption for our own campuses. And so it was supposed to be this kind of savvy little move where they get what they want, we get what we want. But the thing is even if you got that exemption, let's say that you did, then you still have said that this is what fairness looks like, and we have exempted ourselves from fairness.
Yeah, they claim the center.
You can't then turn around to your students and tell them this is what is fair for the world, this legislation, and we're exempting our campus from fairness. And then I think that your students aren't going to see the hypocrisy of that and advocate for change on your campus. Mm-hmm. It's really just the setup for then now the next battle will be your own campus. If you can't make this deal, you have to advocate for God's actual just truth.
Right. Winston Churchill once defined an appeaser as someone who throws others to the alligators, hoping to be the last one eaten.
Yeah, it is.
and that's what this is.
It's the Danegeld all over again, you know.
Yeah, and the trouble is, I believe there's evangelical leadership that's lobbying for these kind of mealy-mouthed exceptions to religious liberty along just those lines. Like, this will satisfy people, and they might not get hit, but that cake baker's going to get hit, and he's not going to be protected by that clause. Mm-hmm. And this is a call to ministers especially. Ministers' pulpits are they really are a safe place sociologically speaking. They're not coming for the pastor yet. They don't want that fight, but they'll come for your people. And so you have a duty to speak to these things.
You have a duty to make the pulpit a dangerous place to be.
No quarter November all year long. Should we go? Can we add another month of the year, like maybe a mid
no quarter 23,
no quarter March? Does it work that way? All right. Speaking of November,
also before we go on, if you want to know what the Danegeld is, you should send your child to New St. Andrews College.
There you go. That's right.
Learn all about it.
Learn all about it.
Just a final go around here. What's your Thanksgiving celebrations? How do you encourage people? This is going to drop, I think, Thanksgiving Day. This one's not live because we're all going to be eating turkey and celebrating with our families on Thanksgiving. But what's a word of encouragement? How do you celebrate, give thanks well on Thanksgiving? Ben, you first.
Me first. Oh, I was just exhorting, the students this last week. One of the not necessarily controversy, but one of the heated things that we have right now in Moscow is we have this murder that's happened in our town, and has set everybody extremely uneasy. And so you go to Philippians, be anxious for nothing. But the thing that's just so striking about that, it's with prayer and thanksgiving. You treat anxiety with gratitude, with thanksgiving, and it is remarkable what a therapeutic thing it is to work through your own heart, finding all the things that you have to be grateful for. And I think teaching your wife to do that, I think, is really important. As you sit and confide in one another and all the different things you're anxious about, to just say, no, what are we grateful for? And to demonstrate and lead her in gratitude like that. And then to have that same thing lived out in front of your kids, and to have a whole holiday that is around that very biblical theme, I think is very profound.
Yeah. And Nehemiah says, the joy of the Lord is our strength. And when you're depressed, afflicted, worried, upset, distraught, you're not in good fighting trim. And when you are genuinely having a good time, it's because you're doing what you do in the presence of the Lord. That doesn't remove the obstacles or the hardships or the battle but it provides strength for the battle. So it's not escapist, like you're running off into your little Thanksgiving room in order to get away from Thanksgiving is not the little smoking porch that you go out on and
Thanksgiving smoking porch.
It should be the foundation for everything. So I would like to argue that one of the foundational Christian graces is gratitude, thanksgiving, and we should seek to build everything that we build, schools, families, churches, resistance movement. All of it should be built on the foundation of thanksgiving, instead of trying to attain to this steadily receding goal. And if we get that, then we'll be thankful. You're just going to be perpetually discouraged, and you're never going to get there. But if you start with thanksgiving, then you're going to have down the road, you're going to find yourself with additional reasons for thanksgiving.
It really works like a nice North Star. Like what it is to be lost, and then all of a sudden, okay, I see the North Star. I know that much, and I can start working my way out from there. And there are frequently times in your life where everything's a mess, everything's a jumble, you don't know what to do. The North Star is always gratitude, I know what I can be grateful for, and I can start listing the things that I can be grateful for. And then all of a sudden you start to find yourself, and you start to know where you are.
Yeah. But what this means is in Ephesians, it says always and for everything, giving thanks. In Thessalonians, it says in everything, give thanks. In Ephesians, for everything, give thanks. In Romans, all things work together for good to them that love God and are called according to his purpose. The thing that is striking about this is, if you say that Thanksgiving is foundational, well, what's foundational? What's underneath? If that's the foundation wall, what are the footings? Well, the footings would be the doctrine of the exhaustive sovereignty of God. So you can't be thankful for everything unless God is involved in everything. If God is not involved in everything, then if God doesn't foreordain, freely and unalterably ordain whatsoever comes to pass, then sometimes we might just get caught in the machinery and it just goes badly for us. But if the hairs of our head are numbered, if a sparrow can't fall to the ground apart from the will of the Father, if every last thing is in the palm of the Father, then we can be thankful for everything. But that means Calvinism, right? And so your choice is to be a Calvinist or to be sad.
Which would you like?
Which
I'd add especially to fathers, you really have to lead in this Thanksgiving thing. So as you come into this season, if you realize that you've been a bit of a curmudgeon and the curmudgeon, ethos has started to fill your home, take this Thanksgiving as an opportunity to change that. And you mentioned finding things to be thankful for. One of the really practical things that we've done in our family worship time, right after dinner, when we pray, it'd be like, well, we're going to go around the table, everybody, one thing you're going to pray for. I've done that petition, but then sometimes just one thing you're thankful for. And it's you quickly, the kids are like, I'm thankful for a house. I'm thankful for school. I'm thankful for good teachers, whatever. And you just have them doing the work. And the fact that you have to do the work of Thanksgiving is not bad. Sometimes I think people think, well, if I have to work at it, then I must be doing it wrong. Like Thanksgiving has to be this kind of, it's just all the spirit, and I don't actually have to exercise any energy. But that's not how it is.
Right.
You have to work your mind and your heart to say, where are the things that I'm thankful for? This came from 1 Chronicles 16, which I was just preaching here at Christ Church, where David says, give thanks, and he says to be mindful of all these things. There's all these exhortations mixed into a Thanksgiving psalm to actually focus your mind on what God's done.
And don't hyper-spiritualize it. Don't get yourself a Gnostic Thanksgiving. There needs to be gravy involved.
Yes, amen. So make sure there's gravy involved for Thanksgiving. Thanks so much for tuning in to this No Quarter November Live. Happy Thanksgiving to you, and the Lord bless you.